Welcome, I'm Faye Waterman, and this is our second Facebook Live with Donna Burton, who is more affectionately known as Donna the Astronomer. And today, Donna is going to be talking about Comets Harbingers of Doom. Now, I have no idea what this is about, but she is going to explain it to us. So welcome, Donna, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Faye. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Good. So, Donna, what are Comets of Harbingers of Doom?
Okay, so comets are actually astronomical bodies. A comet's a large ball of rock and ice in reality. It can be from about maybe 100 meters to about 5 kilometers in diameter, and it orbits the sun. Probably the most famous one, of course, is Halley's Comet that we've all heard about. And of course, Halley, I'll get to it later, but Halley didn't actually discover Halley's Comet.
Right. Well, who did?
Well, the first recording of Halley's Comet goes back to about 456 BCE. And the Greeks recorded it because a large meteorite, the size of just a really large meteorite, we'd say the size of a small bus, but anyway, they didn't have small buses in those days, so it was pretty big, landed, but at the same time, there was this fiery ball visible in the sky for 75 days. And that was right back in the meteorite landed in the Hellespont in Greece. Seems to be the first recording of Halley's Comet. Halley himself basically worked out that this comet that appeared every 75, 76 years was in fact the same comet, and that's why it got named after him.
Right.
But we're going to talk a lot about Halley's Comet and other great comets and how they got a bad reputation. But basically, comets are actually just rock or ice coming predominantly from the outer part of the solar system. And as you know, I've got quite an association with comets. I'm looking for my third one at the moment, having discovered two. And one of my comets won't come back for like 30-something thousand years because it's from really far out past Pluto in the Oort cloud.
Let's just don't breeze over that. You did discover two comets here in Australia, and you were the first woman to do that. So you're searching now for your third comet.
Well, yes, because the other two comets are named Sighting Spring, and I've got one called Comet Burton.
Absolutely. Why not?
Exactly, because if I give it my husband's name, it'll be Comet Ramage, and everyone will think it's his.
Well, it's not, because you're the one that's searching for them.
Exactly.
So
there's a very famous comet called Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 that crashed into Jupiter some years ago. And very few people actually know that one of the discoverers is actually Carolyn Shoemaker, along with her husband, Gene Shoemaker, and David Levy. But most people don't know it. And Carolyn, I must say, we should talk about ladies one day, because Carolyn Shoemaker is one of my heroes. She didn't actually start doing astronomy till her family had all grown up, and she was 53. So there's hope for everybody to do whatever they want to do. Yeah, but anyway, let's get back into what a comet actually is. Remember how we talked last week about Pluto and why it's not a planet anymore? One of those reasons is because of its really crazy orbit. It's really eccentric elliptical orbit. Well, the same with comets. Comets have got really elliptical orbits. So many of them do come from the outer solar system. Like I said, one of mine just, but then some can also come from the inner, from the solar system itself. The second of my two comets comes around every 13 years because it's up. It just fits between us and Jupiter, sort of thing.
What's it called?
That's 386P Sighting Spring.
Right. Okay.
It's special, like its discoverer. It's retrograde. It's the fastest comet to go around the sun backwards, so it's a bit peculiar, like me. Basically, they have these really crazy orbits. So when a comet gets close to the sun, because it's made of ice and rock and everything else, some of the ice starts to melt, and that water vapor. And you might sort of see this when you've seen a bit of, say, dry ice. And it puts off all that, as it heats up, all that sort of gassy stuff that goes around, which is just vapor. And the vapor and the dust lights up in the sun's rays. That's why we see it. I mean, there are comets in the sky at the moment, but they're not the really super visible ones that people get all excited about or frightened about, depending on how you look at these things. It always points away from the sun. So you can see a comet like Halley's Comet, as it gets close to the sun, the tail will point one way, because it's coming towards the sun, and when it's leaving the sun, the tail will be behind it.
Why is that? Is there a specific reason for that?
It's because of the fact that the stuff's burning off as it's behind it, and then the way the sunlight hits it.
Right. Okay.
The way the comet's moving. If you think about it, it does make sense.
Right. How fast?
If I could draw, it would be much easier, but can't really draw on Zoom.
How fast does a comet move?
So The closer it is to the sun, the faster it moves. And that's all because of gravity, of course. It moves very, very quickly when it's close to the sun, but very, very slowly when it's away from it. And usually that's when it's out past the orbit of Pluto. But the other thing that comets do, before we get into my Believe It or Not session, because you're going to be really impressed by some of the things and why comets have this terrible reputation. But comets also leave, because of this trail of gas and dust they leave behind them in orbits. You've heard of meteor showers. We've talked about them over the different times. And basically, it leaves this sort of litter all around the place. And so it's sort of there. And periodically, our atmosphere, our orbit, crosses over where this is. And so our atmosphere hits it, and you see these streams of meteors called meteor showers. The most famous, of course, for us down here are the Leonids and the Geminids, which are later in the year, which are ones that are quite visible to us. Normally meteor showers right throughout the year. We're coming up to the Lyrid meteor shower, which we'll talk about next month. Next week we'll talk about things.
How do they get their names?
So they're based upon what constellation the meteors appear from. It's got absolutely nothing to do with them, with being Leo. But in the sky, how we see the sky, they're in the section, say, for example, the Leonids where Leo is, the Geminids where Gemini is. Okay. And so that's basically how they get their name. So let's do a little bit of history, and we'll do a little bit around the place. But Aristotle just depicted comets with hair. And the whole idea in some ancient things is you see comets because they've got the tail. You'll often see them with a very nasty looking woman's face, or a very scary face with this tail behind them, because it represents mourning. It means that the gods are really upset. Because remember, everything was tied into these old days into what the gods were doing. And in indigenous cultures right across the world, the same thing still applies, or has applied for thousands of years. And so Aristotle basically named comets from the word for the Greek root word comb, which means hair.
Right.
And that's where we got the word comets, and why they look like that. Chinese called them broom stars. Why
did they choose ugly faces of women, or refer to them as that?
Or mournful faces, sad faces. Ugly faces are just the way they drew them. Think of witches and how we depict witches.
Right.
With warts and, it's just the way people do things, rightly or wrongly. But basically, they've even found etchings going right back to East Island in China.
Really?
Of comets. And as I said, in China, they considered, China actually has the best record in their tapestries of various different types of comets going back even probably a millennia or two BCE, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. But they called them broom stars. But then other people saw them as swords. But everything was sort of either mournful, but the gods were very upset, in the sense of if you saw them as a sword, well, then the gods, bad things were going to happen. The gods were pretty angry.
It's our interpretation of what we see. And we all see things differently, don't we?
Yeah, but if you also look at the point of view that where comets got their really bad reputation, and by the time we finish our Believe It or Not section, I'll probably have you convinced that they're related. Because we're going to go right through to the comet Leonid in early 2020 and talk about some of the theories associated with it. But then you've also got rock carvings in Scotland dating back to like 2 millennia BCE, which is pretty impressive when you think about it, and comet-like shapes found in Italy from the late Iron Age. So right across the world, you've got them. You've even got Indigenous Australians images of what could easily be taken to be comets because of that unique shape of something bright with stuff coming out of it.
Right, okay.
But because the comet gave the appearance of basically the head of a woman with low-flowing hair, and it was really sort of, it's like the gods are upset and the gods are displeased. So let's talk about some Believe It or Nots, okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's go back to 44 BC. Okay, so I don't know how your history is, but Julius Caesar died in 44 BC.
Right. Yes.
Then there was a comet in the sky that was visible all throughout Europe. Now, we're not just talking about the comets that are out there now that you need a telescope to look at. We're talking about comets that lit up the night sky. I don't know if you saw it in January 2007. For a week or so, there was this amazing comet, Comet McNaught, P1 Sighting Spring, or P1 McNaught. I was with him when he discovered it. And it lit up the whole sky. It went right across the sky. We call it the Comet of the Century. It's the best comet, or it's the most amazing comet I ever saw for a start. I think Comet of the Century suits it. But it's one that you can actually see with your eyes, that you can go outside probably if you're not in the middle of a city, but you can go outside and you can actually see. And you have to remember, in these cultures in 44 BC, there's no lights. So everything is really dark. I mean, okay, Nero lit up with the, Nero lit up Rome with the corpses of the Christians, but you could still see the dark sky.
Yeah.
And so it's a problem. Now in 79 AD, there's an emperor called Vespasian, and he was a bit of a smart person, smart aleck. He was. And because of this whole hairy thing, right, he sort of like taunts the comet and goes, I'm not scared of this damn comet, I'm bald. Let the king of Parthia worry about it. He's hairy. Well, unfortunately, he died that year while the comet was visible. So let's pop up.
Doomed.
Yes, he got himself into a lot of trouble. 451, Attila the Hun. He gets defeated at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains because when the Great Comet appeared. Skipping ahead in history, poor Napoleon, he fought 60 battles he fought 60 battles and won 60 battles when comets were visible in the sky. However, his final battle that we all know that he lost, it was at the Battle of Waterloo.
Yes.
Napoleon, the Great Comet was visible. When he took on Russia, like crazy man taking on Russia in winter. He should have learned from those who did it before him and suffered the same fate. So Attila the Hun loses. 1066, famous year if you're British, Norman Conquest. Halley's Comet was visible across the sky, and it's actually shown in tapestry.
That would be beautiful.
Yeah, it's shown in the tapestries at when the battle of the Norman Conquest, the Battle of Hastings. 1222. See, this is our believe it or not session. Genghis Khan attempts to invade Europe because Comet Halley's well. Some people like Napoleon and Genghis Khan took advantage of these comets to use them to their advantage. Because if you think about it, if you're on the winning side, the comet's in your favor. If you're on the bad side, it's not. But I mean, going back even further in time, thinking about Islam, one of the most venerated or most important symbols of Islam is a black stone, and it's it's a meteorite that fell as part of a comet, it's believed, and where it landed showed Adam and Eve where to build their altar, and it's sort of kept in Mecca today as one of the most venerated objects. So it's pretty impressive when you think about it and how important they are. 1264.
Yes.
So we're sort of in the Dark Ages, okay?
Yes.
Thinking about history time. So a comet appeared, and then poor Pope Urban IV died. So then we moved through a little bit of time. 1456, the Balkans are invaded by the Ottoman Empire. In that same year, Pope Calixus, Calixus, anyway, he, the third, excommunicates Halley's Comet for being an instrument of the devil.
Oh, really? How can you do that?
I guess if you're the Pope, you can.
All right. Okay.
And so you've got them sort of thinking about this. The Roman prophecies, the Sibylline Oracle speaks of a great conflagration of the sky falling to earth because that's what they look like. And I guess you've heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the most ancient known mythologies from Babylonia.
No, but anyway, please explain.
The Epic of Gilgamesh talks about fire, brimstone, and floods all arriving with the arrival of a comet.
Right. Okay.
So 1556, by this time, some fellows are getting a bit concerned about these comets. So in 1556, Charles V sees the Great Comet of that year, takes it as a sign, and heads himself off to a monastery.
For protect himself.
1665 in London. Any idea what happened?
Oh, gosh.
I'm testing your ancient history now.
No,
yes, or modern history.
You can test it all you like. Tell me.
90,000 people died in the plague.
All right, yes.
1665 was the plague. There was the Great Comet of 1665 was visible. Got the blame for it all. Which will bring me now to, I've got a few more ones in my believe it or not, but thinking of the Great Plague, there was a comet visible at the beginning of 2020. There was a comet visible in the Northern Hemisphere called Comet Leonard. It was visible from around December through to March.
Right.
And of course, certain parts of today's society have blamed it for the pandemic.
Isn't that interesting? And
just like the plague of 1665.
Isn't that interesting? Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
It's interesting. Napoleon Bonaparte, as I said, won battles. 1811, he decides to attack Russia. Okay, comets visible. We know what happened in that one. That one, even I know about that story. 1834, a famous author you might have heard of, a fellow called Mark Twain.
Yes.
He was born in the year of Halley's Comet, and he always swore he would die, that Halley's Comet would see his birth and his death. And certainly not, maybe it was a self-fulfilling prophecy, but 1910, when Halley's Comet appeared, he died.
Really? Isn't that interesting?
Well, I thought so. So let's go into more modern times because we haven't really got over ourselves yet. 1977. Okay, quite a few things happened in 1977. In my memory, the most important one was the pretty princess, Princess Diana, died. If you're British, it might be a bad thing. Tony Blair became the Prime Minister. Hong Kong got handed back to the Chinese, and the Asian economy failed. At the same time, Comet Hale-Bopp was visible in the sky.
Wow. So comets have a lot to answer for.
Well, if you believe it or not.
Yeah.
So you just got to put it like this. I mean, how about this? The Incas back in South America, right?
Yes.
They record that a comet was coming, right? And it foreshadowed the invasion by Francisco Pizarro, who basically wiped him out. So it's not just a European Western thing. It's right across the world in Indigenous cultures everywhere. This whole fear of comets. And it's most likely because they do appear sort of almost from nowhere in lots of ways. Some of these bright comets light up the whole of the sky, and they're unknown. They last for a period of time. And because they could last in Halley's Comet for 75 days, sometimes a bit longer, things are going to happen.
Yes.
And when you think about how cultures see things, what we represent down here on the ground and what we see in the sky, are related. We need to explain things. We can't just accept things. I mean, that's why, I think it was Voltaire said, if God didn't exist, man would have needed to create him just to explain things. But I've got to admit, the excommunication of Halley's Comet is pretty much, I think, is one of the coolest things.
You can't really excommunicate a comet, really, can you?
Well,
you don't really have that control. Well, you can, but the comet's still there, regardless.
The comet didn't go away; he came back anyway. So I'm going to finish with a quote by Lord Byron.
One question I want to ask.
Yes. Yep.
Yes. What about what's happening in Russia and Ukraine? Is there a comet out there right now?
There is, but none that's so massively visible.
Right. Okay.
So, but I mean, also there wasn't a comet visible in the beginning of the Great War or the Second World War either. So we're drawing a long bow by this all, but this is what people actually believe. That's why they're called Harbingers of Doom, when in fact they're just chunks of rock from the outer solar system putting on a pretty cool display.
Okay. Now, what's your quote,
Donna?
My
quote from Lord Byron, it goes, "The hour has arrived, and it became a wandering mass of shapeless flame, a pathless comet and a curse, the menace of the universe."
And believe it or not, I mean, if you're superstitious, it is what we want to believe, isn't it?
It is. And just for someone like Lord Byron, I mean, better known for his romantic sort of stuff and everything else, it's very much the whole concept that we need to explain things. We need to have an understanding. Wars don't, we can't accept that something happens just because it happens. We need to find something to blame, and poor old comets fit in really well.
Now, Donna, that was great information. We're going to come back next week with our third session for Facebook Live. And what are we going to be talking about next week?
Well, next week, because we're coming into the beginning of April, we're going to talk about what's in the sky in April.
Okay, and there's lots of things happening in the sky in April.
And there's lots of things. Let's talk about Easter, the date of Easter.
Yes.
The date of Ramadan and the date of Passover. You know that they have actually nothing to do with the actual spiritual events they all represent. They're all based upon phases of the moon. So yesterday was equinox. Happy autumn equinox for us, spring equinox for our Northern Hemisphere friends. So it's the beginning of when the days is going to actually start to get shorter for us and longer for them. Easter is based upon being the full moon of the Sunday closest to the full moon after equinox.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why every Easter has a full moon, which is really bad if you're taking the kids out stargazing.
Yeah, because you can't see the stars because the moon's taken over.
So again, it's got nothing to do with events in Jerusalem 2000 and something years ago, almost 2000 years ago. And this was set a couple of millennia BCE. All these states were worked out long before any of the actual religious events that they go to. So we're going to talk about what's happening in April in the sky.
Beautiful. That'll be fascinating. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for your time. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.